The pain came suddenly, sharp and humiliating, the kind that doesn't care how powerful or wealthy you are. One careless moment, a shattered glass, and the billionaire stood alone in his marble kitchen, staring at blood running down his hand. The staff froze. Someone rushed for bandages. Someone else called for a doctor. But in that moment, surrounded by luxury and silence, he felt strangely small, not because of the injury, but because no one dared to truly come close. By the time his hand was wrapped, the mansion had returned to its quiet rhythm. The doctor said it would heal. Money always found the best doctors. Still, the throbbing wouldn't stop. It wasn't just physical pain. It was the exhaustion he carried every day, the weight of a life built on control, schedules, and distance. He dismissed everyone and retreated to his study, holding his bandaged hand like it was something fragile, something unfamiliar. That's when he heard the soft patter of tiny feet. She wasn't supposed to be there. The maid had tried to keep her toddler in the staff quarters, far from the main house. Rules were rules in this mansion. But children didn't understand rules. The little girl slipped through an open door, clutching a worn stuffed toy, her wide eyes curious instead of afraid. She looked at the billionaire like he wasn't a powerful man or a distant employer. To her, he was just someone hurting. The maid rushed in, face pale with fear, apologizing before he could say a word. She reached for her child, already expecting anger, maybe punishment. But the billionaire didn't speak. He was watching the toddler, who had noticed the white bandage around his hand. She pointed at it, frowned, and then did something no one expected. She stepped closer. Before anyone could stop her, the toddler gently took his injured hand in both of hers. Her touch was warm, careful, as if she understood pain in a way adults often forget. Then, without a word, she leaned forward and kissed the bandage. It was quick, innocent, and completely unplanned. The room went still. The maid gasped. The billionaire froze. Something shifted. The pain didn't vanish like magic. The injury didn't suddenly disappear. But something else eased. Something deeper. A tightness he hadn't realized he'd been carrying loosened in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt seen not as a billionaire, not as a boss, but as a human being who had been hurt. The toddler smiled, satisfied, as if she had done exactly what she came to do. The maid stood frozen, waiting for the consequences. And the billionaire, staring at his bandaged hand, felt a question rise that money had never been able to answer. Why did that small, simple act feel more powerful than anything else in his world? He slowly looked up at the maid, then back at the child, unaware that this moment, this kiss, was about to change far more than his wounded hand. The billionaire finally lowered his hand, the bandage still warm where the toddler's lips had touched it. He said nothing for a long moment, and the silence stretched until it became unbearable. The maid stood stiff, her hands shaking as she reached for her child again, whispering apologies under her breath. She had worked in this mansion for 3 years, always careful, always invisible. One mistake could cost her everything. Bringing her child here had never been part of the plan. He waved his other hand slowly, stopping her. The gesture surprised them both. "Leave her," he said quietly. The maid froze. She nodded, unsure if she had heard correctly. The toddler looked up at him again, curious, as if waiting for a response to the comfort she had offered. He turned away, walking toward the wide window that overlooked the gardens, his injured hand resting against his chest. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Endless wealth, power, respect. But no one saw the nights he spent awake, the way pain lingered longer than it should, or how the mansion felt more like a museum than a home. The maid watched him carefully. She knew stories about him, the ones whispered among the staff. They said he had lost his family years ago, that he didn't allow photographs on the walls. That laughter made him uncomfortable. Some said his heart had hardened with success. Others said it had broken long before the money came. She had never dared to believe either version until now. Her toddler tugged at her uniform, pointing at the bandage again. "Hurt," the child murmured softly. "Yes," the maid whispered back, her voice tight. "He's hurt." The billionaire heard it. The word echoed in his mind. Hurt. Simple. Honest. Not the kind of word adults use in boardrooms or courtrooms. He remembered being a child once, scraping his knee, run as someone who cared. That memory felt distant, almost unreal, but it refused to leave him alone. He turned back toward them, his expression unreadable. "How old is she?" he asked. "2," the maid replied quickly. She's very gentle." He nodded, as if filing away information that mattered more than it should. His gaze lingered on the child, then drifted to the maid's tired face. He noticed things he had ignored before: the worn shoes, the way she stood protectively, the quiet strength in her eyes. This woman wasn't just an employee. She was a mother carrying a life much heavier than his bandaged hand. The mansion felt different now. The air wasn't as cold, yet the tension remained thick and uncertain. Rules had been crossed, boundaries blurred, and he knew once things changed, they never truly went back. "Has she done this before?" he asked, his voice low. The maid swallowed. "When someone is sick or hurt," she said, "she believes a kiss can help." He looked down at his hand again. The pain was still there, steady and real, but beneath it was something unfamiliar. Curiosity, maybe hope, or maybe fear what this moment might awaken. He didn't know why this child had walked into his life, or why that small kiss had shaken him so deeply. What he did know was this: the healing everyone expected was only the beginning, and whatever was happening inside this mansion was far from over. That night, the billionaire barely slept. The mansion was quiet, but his mind wasn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt that small, gentle touch again. The kiss hadn't healed his hand, not really. The bandage still needed changing. The cut still stung. But something inside him felt exposed, as if a locked door had been opened without his permission. He didn't like that feeling. Control had always been his safety. Down the long corridor, in a small room meant for staff, the maid sat awake as well. Her daughter slept beside her, one tiny hand curled into her shirt. The maid stared at the wall, replaying the moment over and over. She knew she had crossed a line just by bringing her child into the main house. She had done it out of necessity, not defiance. Daycare had fallen through. She had no family nearby. Still, she feared what tomorrow might bring. Warnings, fines, termination. She had seen it happen to others. In the morning, the routine resumed, but it felt strained. The staff whispered more than usual. News traveled fast in a place like this. A maid's toddler had touched the billionaire, kissed his injured hand. Some said he had smiled. Others said he looked shaken. No one knew what it meant, but everyone sensed a shift. The housekeeper cast sharp glances at the maid, already measuring consequences. Rules were clear, and exceptions were dangerous. The billionaire noticed it all. He noticed how the maid avoided his eyes, how she moved faster than necessary, how she kept her child hidden. He also noticed his own behavior changing. He asked for his bandage to be changed later than usual. He skipped a meeting he never would have missed before. When he caught sight of a small stuffed toy left behind near the hallway, his chest tightened for reasons he didn't fully understand. From his perspective, the injury had become more than a simple accident. The doctor had said healing would take time, maybe weeks, but every throb of pain now reminded him of something else: connection, vulnerability, things he had spent a lifetime avoiding. He wondered why a child's simple belief felt more powerful than all his resources. That question unsettled him. From a maid's perspective, the tension was suffocating. She had always lived carefully, quietly. Her job wasn't just work, it was survival. She depended on it to feed her child, to keep a roof over their heads. And now her daughter had unknowingly stepped into a world of power, wealth, and fragile egos. The maid feared kindness could be misunderstood, that innocence could be punished. The toddler, unaware of any of this, toddled through her small world believing she had helped someone. She kept pointing at her own hand, pressing her lips to it, smiling proudly. To her, healing was simple. Love went where pain was. And somewhere between the billionaire's guarded heart and the maid's quiet fear, a conflict was growing. Not loud, not obvious, but deep. A clash between rules and compassion, between image and humanity. The injury on his hand would eventually close, but the questions it raised were only beginning to bleed through, and no one yet knew how much they would cost. The third day after the injury, the billionaire's hand worsened instead of improving. The skin around a bandage turned red and swollen, and the pain grew sharper, more persistent. The doctor returned, his calm voice unable to hide concern. He spoke about infection, about rest, about avoiding stress. But stress was the only thing the billionaire seemed unable to avoid. The mansion felt heavier with every passing hour, like it was holding its breath. Word spread quickly among the staff. An injury that wouldn't heal was dangerous, especially for a man whose life depended on constant decisions and control. Meetings were canceled. Phones rang unanswered. Investors waited. The housekeeper grew stricter, enforcing rules with sudden harshness, as if order alone could stop something from unraveling. Her eyes kept returning to the maid and her child, suspicion clear and unspoken. The maid felt it too. The stares, the whispers, the tension that followed her through every hallway. She kept her daughter close, limiting her movements, fearing one wrong step could cost her everything. Yet she also noticed something else, how the billionaire's gaze would linger whenever he heard the child's soft laugh echo faintly from another room. It was brief, almost hidden, but real. That evening, a storm rolled in. Rain tapped against the tall windows, and thunder rumbled through the mansion like a warning. The billionaire sat alone in his study, his injured hand throbbing despite fresh bandages and medication. The pain was no longer just physical. It crawled into his thoughts, stirring memories he had buried for years. Loss, regret, a time when he had believed healing could come from something simple. Downstairs, the maid struggled with her own decision. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Infection, time running out. She remembered her daughter's unshaken belief, the way the child trusted love over logic. The maid knew how foolish it would seem, how dangerous it could be if misunderstood. But fear for the billionaire's condition mixed with fear for her job, twisting together until she could barely breathe. The housekeeper approached her quietly, voice sharp. "Keep your child out of sight," she warned. "This is not the time for mistakes." The maid nodded, but her hands trembled. Her daughter looked up at her, sensing the tension, then pointed toward the stairs. "Hurt man," she whispered. At the same moment, upstairs, the billionaire presses back against the desk, fighting dizziness. For the first time in years, he felt truly powerless. Money couldn't speed healing. Authority couldn't command his body to obey. He thought of the toddler's kiss again, the calm certainty in her eyes. The thought unsettled him and comforted him at the same time. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway outside his study. The maid stood at the bottom of the stairs, her heart pounding, her child in her arms. She knew this moment could change everything. One step forward could mean hope or ruin. The storm thundered louder. The mansion lights flickered, and as she lifted her foot onto the first stair, the tension reached its breaking point, leaving everyone waiting for what would happen next. The maid took that step, then another. Each stair creaked beneath her weight, sounding louder than it should have in the quiet mansion. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure someone would hear it. She held her toddler close, feeling the steady warmth of her small body, drawing strength from it. Halfway up, a shadow moved at the top of the stairs. The housekeeper stood there, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "What are you doing?" she demanded in a low voice. The maid stopped. Words failed her for a moment. She looked down at her child, then back up. "He's not well," she said softly. The doctor said, "This is not your place." The housekeeper snapped. "You've already caused enough trouble." Before the maid could respond, a sudden crash of thunder shook the mansion. At the same time, a dull thud echoed from the study above. The housekeeper's expression changed. Fear flickered across her face. Without another word, she turned and rushed toward the sound. The maid didn't think anymore. She followed. Inside the study, the billionaire was slumped against his desk, pale and sweating, his injured hand clenched tightly against his chest. Papers were scattered on the floor, his phone lying just out of reach. The storm outside raged, rain pounding the windows as if time itself was running out. The housekeeper froze at the doorway, unsure what to do next. The maid stepped forward instinctively. She knelt beside him, her voice trembling as she called his name. His eyes opened slightly, unfocused. He tried to speak, but the pain stole his breath. The bandage on his hand was soaked through now, the swelling worse than before. The injury had become a crisis. The toddler slipped from her mother's arms and toddled closer, drawn by something no one else could see. She knelt too, reaching for the bandaged hand with the same calm confidence as before. The housekeeper started to protest, but stopped when the billionaire weakly lifted his uninjured hand, signaling her to wait. The child pressed her lips gently to the bandage again, lingering this time. She whispered something only she understood. The room went still. Then the billionaire gasped. It wasn't relief. It was shock. His body tensed, and for a moment everyone feared the worst. The maid pulled her daughter back, panic flooding her face. But the billionaire's eyes opened wider now, clear and alert. He stared at his hand, then at the child, then at the maid. Something had changed, not just in his body, but in the air around them. Before anyone could speak, the door burst open. A security officer rushed in, followed by a senior executive who had arrived unexpectedly due to the canceled meetings. They took in the scene. The maid on the floor, her child near the billionaire, the housekeeper frozen in place, and their expressions hardened with misunderstanding. "What is going on here?" the executive demanded. The maid felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't just about an injury anymore. This was about rules, power, and accusations waiting to happen. The billionaire slowly pushed himself upright, his gaze locked on the maid and her child, knowing that whatever he said next to protect them or destroy them. And in that charged silence, with the storm roaring outside and eyes watching from every corner, the true conflict revealed itself. Because the most dangerous wound in the room was no longer on his hand, but in the truth that was about to come out. The billionaire broke the silence with a slow, steady breath. Everyone expected anger, orders, consequences. Instead, his voice came out low and controlled, but edged with something raw. "Step back," he said to the security officer and the executive. "All of you." The authority in his tone left no room for argument. They hesitated, then obeyed, confusion written across their faces. He flexed his injured hand carefully. The pain was still there, but it had shifted. The burning had dulled. The tightness eased just enough for him to feel it. The doctor's warning echoed in his mind, but so did something else. Clarity. He looked at the maid, still kneeling, shielding her child as if bracing for a blow. "She didn't hurt me," he said firmly. "She helped me." The housekeeper opened her mouth to speak, but he raised a finger. "I've spent my life believing control keeps chaos away," he continued. "But this injury happened because I ignored pain. I pushed through it, just like I've ignored people." His gaze dropped to the toddler, who watched him calmly. "This child reminded me to stop." The executive frowned. "Sir, with respect, this is highly inappropriate. Liability alone." "I'll handle liability." The billionaire cut in. "What I won't handle is cruelty disguised as rules." The maid's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent. She had learned long ago that hope could be dangerous. The doctor arrived moments later, summoned during the chaos. He examined the hand again, surprise flickering across his face. The swelling had stabilized. The infection hadn't spread. "It's still serious," he said carefully. "But this is better than I expected." A collective breath was released in the room. The billionaire nodded once. "She stays," he said, looking at the maid. "Both of them." The housekeeper stiffened. "Sir, this isn't a request," he said quietly. "Effective immediately. Staff policies are changing. Child care will be provided on-site. No one should have to choose between work and protecting their child." The words landed like thunder. The maid pressed her hand to her mouth, shaking now, overwhelmed. She whispered thank you, but he shook his head. "You didn't save me with a kiss," he said. "You saved me by reminding me I was human." As the room began to clear, tension easing into disbelief, the billionaire crouched slightly to the toddler's level. "You're very brave," he said. She smiled, then reached out and tapped his bandage once more, satisfied. Just as the moment settled, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed. The executive noticed. "Bad news?" he asked. The billionaire exhaled slowly. "The accident," he said. "It wasn't an accident." He looked at the maid, then at the storm still raging outside. "The glass was weakened before it broke. Someone wanted me injured, distracted. The room went still again, because while one wound was finally beginning to heal, another threat had just surfaced, and this time, no amount of money or innocence could kiss it away. The investigation moved quietly after that night. The billionaire didn't announce it, didn't make threats or dramatic speeches. He simply watched. Security footage was reviewed. Staff schedules were checked. Within days, the truth surfaced. A supplier with access to the kitchen had tampered with the glass, hoping a small injury would delay a critical merger and shake confidence. It was calculated, cold, and careless. The man was removed and handed over without noise. Power, when used calmly, proved far more effective than anger. As the danger faded, the mansion began to change in ways no one expected. The billionaire kept his promise. A small, bright room near the gardens was converted into a childcare space. It wasn't charity. It was acknowledgement. Productivity improved. Smiles appeared where there had only been fear. The staff still worked hard, but now they felt seen. That shift mattered more than any policy memo. The maid remained cautious at first, as if waiting for kindness to be taken back. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing was revoked. Her job became steadier. Her shoulders slowly relaxed. She watched her daughter play safely while she worked, no longer torn between duty and love. For the first time in years, she slept through the night. The billionaire's hand healed as expected. The bandage came off, leaving a thin scar. The doctor called it a reminder. The billionaire agreed. Every time he looked at it, he remembered that pain ignored only grows louder, and healing often begins where pride ends. He no longer rushed past meals or skipped rest. He listened more. He asked names. He noticed when rooms felt too quiet. One afternoon, he sat on a bench in the garden while the toddler toddled nearby, chasing butterflies. She tripped, then stood up on her own, brushing dirt from her hands. He smiled without realizing it. In that moment, Will felt smaller and life felt larger. The maid joined him hesitantly. "She still believes kisses fix everything," she said softly. He looked at his scarred hand. "Sometimes they do," he replied. When she thanked him again, he shook his head. "You gave me something I didn't know I'd lost," he said. Perspective. The final change came quietly. At a board meeting weeks later, when asked what had shifted his leadership style, the billionaire didn't mention the injury, the threat, or the investigation. He spoke about humanity, about building success without breaking people. Some executives didn't understand, but results followed, and results silenced doubt. The story never made headlines. No viral clips. No public statements. But inside that mansion, something lasting took root. A reminder that even the most powerful lives can be changed by the smallest hands, the simplest beliefs, and a moment of kindness that asks nothing in return. And every now and then, when his hand ached on cold mornings, the billionaire smiled, because some wounds heal skin and others heal hearts.